Hello everyone, today the subject of discussion is creatine. What is creatine? It's a great question. Yes, hello? 21st century? Oh, it's for you. Sorry, that was such a lame joke. Here it is. This video is going to cover how creatine works, a brief history about it, what the studies say, and common myths. So creatine was originally discovered in 1832 by a French scientist who gave it the name creatine, which comes from the word crease, which is Greek for flesh. So, how does this flesh work, you might ask? That's a great question. Well, let's see if we can answer it. Okay, so here's what's going on inside the muscle. This is how creatine works. So you have an adenosine triphosphate, and let's say you have a muscle contraction. So muscle contraction happens, which results in you having cleaved one of these phosphates off the adenosine triphosphate, which results in your ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. So, oh no, we're missing a phosphate here, and this is our main source of energy for muscle contractions. What are we going to do? Well, creatine phosphate, see you have this other molecule here, creatine, a little phosphate group hanging off. This guy's just down here ready to donate this phosphate to this adenosine triphosphate, or adenosine diphosphate, ADP. So this little guy right here is super ready to get rid of this. So a enzyme, creatine kinase, comes in here and cleaves off this, which allows this to donate its phosphate up to here. So then next thing you know, boom, we're back up to ATP. So we're ready to do another contraction cycle. So this is why supplementing with creatine allows for a better performance, because you're increasing the amount of ATP that can be generated inside the muscle. It's also important to note that obviously there's different ways you can make adenosine triphosphate. This is a 1:1 ratio, which means that for every one creatine phosphate, you're going to get 1 ATP. So very quick, but not a very powerful system. So that's essentially what's happening inside the muscle cell when you're supplementing with creatine. So now you basically have your PhD in creatine phosphate. So now you might ask, well, how does this make sense? How does this affect my exercise? Let's take a look. Okay, so by looking at this picture here, which mostly everyone who is an exercise science major should be familiar with, you can see that the first red bar is the ATP creatine phosphate system, the yellow is the glycolysis system, and the blue is the oxidative. These are going to relate to the different energy systems that are used to generate ATP during a muscle contraction. Okay, so what's happening when you supplement with creatine? To make it really easy, basically, you're just going to take that red bar and you're going to extend it. In other words, your maximum energy coming from the creatine phosphate system is going to last longer. And that makes sense because you're increasing the creatine phosphate concentration inside the skeletal muscle, meaning that the ATP production from the creatine phosphate system is going to be better, or you're going to have more. By looking at this graph, you can understand why your oxidative and your glycolytic systems aren't necessarily affected by supplementing with creatine. In other words, you wouldn't take creatine if you wanted to run a marathon. That's what this graph is ultimately showing us.
Yes, hello, Jeremy. I'm just a little bird, and I heard that creatine really does a lot of damage to your kidneys, and then because that means I shouldn't take it.
Well, this article from 2008, published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology, not only showed that creatine did not affect renal function, but it actually increased it, of course with exercise. The subjects in the study received 0.3 grams per kilogram per day of creatine for the first week and 0.15 grams per kilogram per day for the next 11 weeks. For a 170-pound individual, this would be about 23 grams for the loading phase, that first week, and about 11 grams for the next 11 weeks, which is much higher than what's recommended. You can see here that the serum cystatin C concentrations at baseline as compared to the end of the 12 weeks was actually lower in the creatine group versus the placebo group. From this, it's possible to extrapolate that while creatine in the past has thought to cause renal damage, that it actually doesn't. Additionally, a review article published in Amino Acids in 2010 took a more in-depth look at the different factors of creatine supplementation in terms of health. They looked at healthy individuals and the effect that creatine had with respect to liver, muscle fiber, muscle cramps, and kidney damage. Yes, despite papers and editorials published in the scientific and sports media, there are no real incidents of muscle cramps, gastrointestinal discomfort, muscle fiber rupture, liver and kidney impairment after regular supplementation with creatine. The few renal incidents that have been reported remain largely anecdotal.
What in tarnation? Then why I've always been told that creatine hurts my renal system.
Well, there was a study done in 2000 that showed that people that supplemented with creatine had higher levels of creatinine inside their system. The problem with using creatinine as a marker for renal damage is that creatine spontaneously converts into creatinine. So naturally, if you're supplementing with creatine and you're trying to increase the amount of creatine in your muscles, you're probably going to have a higher creatinine level. Duh.
Well, I'm just a little old lady. My hair long ago turned to gray. I've been told that creatine's only for those young bucks in the gyms. Should I be taking it?
Well, this study, also published in the European Journal of Physiology in 2008, showed that older women consuming creatines equivalent to 0.3 grams per kilogram per day for 7 days increased strength outcomes and also increased lower body functional capacity. Additionally, what makes this study interesting is that the women in the study did not exercise during the 7-day creatine supplementation, which means that the creatine alone was the factor for which they attributed the change in performance as compared to the placebo group.
Ooh wee. So now that you're telling me the creatine isn't that bad, how should I take it? Ooh wee.
If you get that reference, you should get extra credit. In the guidelines for this video, it was stated that we can't use something prior to 2007, but I feel like it'd be a little irresponsible of me not to mention where most of these guidelines are coming from in terms of recommendations for how much creatine to be taking. So we're going to discuss a couple of the historical pieces of literature that have guided us to where we are today. In the 1990s, 3 studies were performed that showed that the optimal amount of creatine to ingest for a loading phase was approximately 20 grams per day for 4 to 6 days. This is where the recommendation of the loading phase comes from. However, in 1996, another study showed that you could achieve the same levels of muscle creatine with just 3 grams per day. It just takes about 30 days to get the same level of creatine in the muscle. As scientists, I care not for this performance aspect of creatine. Does it have any other applications? Well, I'm glad you asked because yes, there is. A study was performed in 2015 and published to the Journal of Neuroscience. This study sought to evaluate the effects of supplementing with creatine during hypoxic conditions. This was done to simulate the conditions in the brain during degenerative diseases such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. All subjects were placed in hypoxic conditions and then ran through a series of neurological testing. The results showed that the subjects supplementing with creatine could outperform the control group. This indicates that creatine could be a good supplementation for those suffering from degenerative diseases. Absolutely riveting. If you weren't already sold on creatine, maybe you should reconsider. At this point, I would like to look at a final piece of research that was a meta-analysis on a bunch of different creatine studies. Hopefully this will bring everything together, and if you weren't already sold on the supplement, maybe you will be after this. A meta-analysis was performed in 2014 by Derives and Phillips that sought to pull together a body of information on creatine supplementation for older adults. Initially, 121 articles were found, but due to the exclusion criteria, it was narrowed down to 12 papers. In order to be considered for the meta-analysis, the research had to be randomized with a placebo/control group. The adults had to be over the age of 45 with no muscular or degenerative diseases. There had to be no other supplementation being taken that is known to influence anabolism. The research had to last at least 6 weeks in length. and they also had to have at least 2 resistant training sessions per week. We can see that once the mean difference was calculated from research trial to research trial, that the results tend to favor the creatine versus the control. Section A was looking at the total body mass, while Section B was looking at the fat-free mass, or the lean muscle. This slide shows the different exercises performed from research trial to research trial. You can see that overall there tends to be a favoring of creatine supplementation versus the placebo group. Well, there you have it, everyone. There's my video. I hope it was informative as well as entertaining. From this video, I hope you've come to the conclusion that I personally would recommend taking creatine if you are a healthy young adult, a healthy older adult, or if you want to increase athletic performance. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button for videos in the future that are evidence-based. Based in evidence. Evidence-based. Till next time, cowboys.